Montee Ball is heading to the College Football Hall of Fame. I'm going to tell you the exact moment I knew he was going to be a really good player for Wisconsin.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Today's episode, we're talking Montee Ball to the College Football Hall of Fame. We're going to talk Greg Gard, 200 wins. This is a show of milestones today, plus a new defensive coordinator, a new defensive coach coming in with coordinator experience, what I think that means for the staff in general. I really like what they've done there. But first, we got to get into it, and it is Montee Ball's segment to lead off. But first, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, let's talk Montee Ball. Announced heading to the College Football Hall of Fame. Well deserved honor. Absolutely. There's a lot I want to talk about with Montee Ball. I can do an entire show on him, from kind of where he started as a recruit to where he thought he might be leaving the program, where he thought he might become a linebacker, to his resurgence, his final year, what happened in the NFL. There's so much we could get into with Montee Ball, but I want to start here. I teased it at the open. There's a specific moment where I can trace it back to me, where I said, that guy's going to be really good. It's a little play that's kind of lost in everything he did, because it doesn't stand out if you look at the game charts. It doesn't stand out if you look at his highlight reel. It's probably not on his highlight reel, to be honest. I go back to that 2010 game against Iowa, and that was a big-time Iowa team, big-time Wisconsin team. Wisconsin comes into that game ranked 15th, Iowa's 13th, or maybe it's vice versa, but they're both ranked in the 15-13 range. That game went down to the wire. Last drive of the game, second to last drive of the game, the Badgers are driving. They're down 30-24 against this really tough Iowa team. They're on the road. It's 30-24. There's 3 minutes and change left. It's 4th and 4. And John Clay's been banged up. White has been banged up. 4th and 4. Scott Tolzien is in. They have one timeout left. If they don't get this, it's basically the game. Iowa gets one more first down, and it's ball game. So it's 4th and 4. They're down 6. They go 5 wide, trips to the wide side, and they put Montee Ball in the slot. Now, it's super important to remember, up until this point, Montee Ball was running back number 3, basically. It was Clay, it was White. Both of those guys get banged up. And now in the biggest play of the game, 5 wide, you have Montee Ball in the slot on the wide side. They throw him a slant. He beats the linebacker. He has to make like this diving, not diving, but kind of sliding catch. And I just remember in the moment thinking, gosh, that's impressive. For a third-string running back on 4th down to come out and beat a linebacker on a slant and then make a sliding catch to extend the drive in one of the most hostile environments in college football. So many backup running backs aren't mentally locked in to be put in that moment to succeed and excel in that moment, and that one-on-one with the entire game on the line, in a play where if you didn't watch the game, you never would have known the importance of it. But for him to win that one-on-one against an Iowa linebacker in the middle of the field on 4th and 4 with everything on the line to make a sliding catch, I was like, gosh, that guy's really locked in for a third-string running back. What an impressive play. And then, of course, later in that game, on that same drive, he has that iconic run where they're at like the 12, 13-yard line. They hand it off the ball. He bounces off the first guy. Another guy, safety, comes in and hits him. Another linebacker meets him, and he fights through that, and he reaches over the goal line. Last effort, they score a touchdown. They hang on to win. That was the coming out party for Montee Ball. But it was that one play, that 4th and 4 catch to extend the drive. I just thought, gosh, that guy's really going to be a player. I remember that play like I saw it, it happened yesterday. And then you go down the accolades, man. What a deserving honor for one of the greatest running backs at one of the greatest running back schools in the history of college football. You have that 2011 Montee Ball season. So the season following up that 2010 year, Montee has 39 total touchdowns. Like, it's insanity what he did in 2011. 6.3 yards per carry, 1,900 rushing yards, 33 rushing touchdowns, another 6 pass or reception touchdowns, 39 total. Absolutely bonkers. Think about what you got to do to score 39 touchdowns in a year. Think about the types of games, individual games you have to put up to be able to do that over the course of a season. Just absolutely bonkers numbers. NCAA record for career touchdowns. Rushing touchdowns, second all-time for the Badgers. Rushing yards at 5,100 yards, second to only, obviously, Ron Dane. We all know that. Two-time consensus first-team All-American. Doak Walker Award winner, which is always given to the nation's best running back. I think in that 2011 season, he finished fourth in the Heisman. And I always have this gripe with Badgers running backs. They never fully get the credit they deserve. That happened to Montee. That happened to Melvin. He had 39 total touchdowns and finished fourth in Heisman voting. Like, stop. Just stop. Don't even send a Badger running back to that award show anymore if they ever get to that point. With Montee Ball's selection, you got 6 former Badgers that have been inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame since 2010. You're talking Barry Alvarez, Ron Dane, Tim Krumrie, Joe Thomas, Troy Vincent, and now the great Montee Ball joining that group of players. And the other thing you want to hit on, you think back to Montee Ball, and it's Montee Ball, and then it's that era of Badgers football. You know, the success they had, the Michigan State Big Ten championship game, the offensive line they had. You had Russell Wilson and Scott Tolzien. You had those receivers. You think back to those offenses, man, and they were just a buzzsaw. Those teams were nightmares for opposing defensive coordinators. That Scott Tolzien or that Russell Wilson 2011 year, no, 2009, no. Russell Wilson was 10. I'm trying to remember now. No, he was 11. I'm getting my years mixed up. But that Russell Wilson offense had NFL guys everywhere. You had Russell Wilson, you had Montee Ball, you had James White, you had Aberderis, you had Toon, you had 4 offensive linemen drafted, you had Pedersen. Brady Ewing was the fullback on that team, and he got drafted in the 5th round. What a friggin' wagon. And Montee Ball was part of the core of that. So you look back at his career, it's the individual success. It's the team success. He was part of some of the great offenses in Badger history. He set individual records, team records, and just everything that he did. This is an obvious Hall of Fame guy, one of the GOATs of Badger football, one of the GOATs of college football from a running back standpoint. And the numbers back it up. The other thing that I find really interesting with Montee Ball is he was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school. And then it took him a bit, right? That first year, even that second year, he was kind of buried on the depth chart. And he talked about not really even knowing what his future was, whether it was maybe as a linebacker, maybe whether it was with the program or not. 2 things here. If this was in 2024, he probably left the program. He probably would have left and gone somewhere else in the portal. And you just think of all these stories going forward that we're not going to get as college football fans of players that for a couple of years, it didn't look like they were necessarily on the right track. And then suddenly they explode and you're like, wow, that guy really developed behind the scenes. He really put in the time. He really stuck after it. And I'm great with player movement. I've talked about that a bunch. But you're going to miss some of these stories where players are just going to leave because it doesn't happen right away. And that is just the offset of it. Players have the right to do that for sure. And I think players should have the right to get paid. I've always talked about that. I don't think it's a perfect system, and because of that, you're going to miss out on some of these stories. Because Montee Ball's the type of guy that you probably leave if you don't see success as the first couple of years as a 4-star out-of-state running back. You probably go somewhere else, and then you never would have had this career arc of Montee Ball where it took a couple of years, and then once he put it together, you remember that his senior year, which wasn't quite as good as his junior year, but there was a Heisman campaign built around this. It was "This fall belongs to Ball." I don't know if you remember those commercials, the advertisements. I mean, I do. That was as much hype for a running back coming back as I've seen in a long time. And you just may not get that as much anymore. But either way, Montee Ball to the College Football Hall of Fame, incredibly well-deserved. One of the greatest Badger running backs of all time, one of the greatest college football running backs of all time. From a career standpoint and a team success standpoint, there's no arguing about it. He had a really unique style, slashing in between the tackles, big-time jump cuts, really subtle moves in between the holes, ran tough, had a spin move, a stiff arm, could catch the ball really well out of the backfield. Yeah, checks every box. Congratulations, Montee Ball. I loved watching him play here, and this is absolutely earned. Coming up, let's talk Greg Gard, 200 wins, and where that stacks up. And could he catch Bo Ryan? Let's talk about it next. Locked On Badgers. First, today's episode brought to you by our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the ultimate in daily fantasy. They are simple and easy. And one of the reasons I use them is I don't have to fumble around with season-long commitments and a bunch of moving parts and really complex things where I'm playing against seasoned veterans who have thousands of leagues. And I'm like, I'm going to get slaughtered. Prize Picks is easy. It's just you against the numbers. You're picking more or less on 2 or more statistical categories. That's it. You're not competing against a bunch of ringers out there. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play, even if one of your players gets hurt. So you're not going to find that anywhere else. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. This is why I use it. It's fast, it's simple, it's easy. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONCollege, and you get $50 instantly when you play $5. PrizePicks, run your game over at PrizePicks. Run your game. Let's talk Greg Gard here, because again, this is kind of a show of milestones. Greg Gard getting his 200th win. Let's walk through a couple things here. The last win against Ohio State, again, not the prettiest win, but lost in the subtext of that was Greg Gard picking up his 200th win at Wisconsin, making him just the fourth coach in program history to reach that milestone. The other coaches here are Walter Meanwell, Bo Ryan, and Bud Foster. I'm gonna get into Walter Meanwell in a second, because I had to kind of actually look up who that was. His 600 winning percentage in the Big Ten ranks third among active coaches during his tenure, trailing only Purdue's Matt Painter, who's probably a future Naismith College Hall of Fame basketball coach, and Tom Izzo, who is one of the all-time greats. Gard is third in his tenure behind those two coaches, winning 60% of his conference games. His conference win rate is eighth best among Big Ten coaches in the last 45 years. So you're going back to the 1980s, basically, and of every coach since that era, which, you're going back to the Dwight Clark, Joe Montana era of sportsdom. In the last 45 years, Greg Gard is the eighth best win percentage in the Big Ten. That the win rate in the Big Ten, that's really impressive stuff. So let's talk about it for a second. The first thing I want to talk about is Greg Gard going to end up as the all-time wins leader at the University of Wisconsin? He's got 200 now. Bo Ryan's got 364. So it was 164 ahead of Greg Gard. If Greg Gard averages, which he's been basically 20 wins, if he gets to about that point, you're talking another 8 seasons, and Greg Gard is there. Greg Gard feels like a guy who's going to coach more than 8 more seasons. He just does. It feels like this is kind of his destination job. He's a bit of a lifer. He's a Wisconsin guy. If he keeps winning at this clip, they're not going to fire him. I also don't think, for a lot of the same reasons a guy like Lance Leipold took a while for other teams to really come after. I don't think Greg Gard is the type of coach that a lot of other programs are going to come after and try to poach. And even if they did, I don't know if Greg Gard would want to leave Wisconsin with what he started to build here a little bit. I think there's a chance he retires as Wisconsin's all-time wins leader. Now, things can change quickly, and a lot of things can happen. And obviously, Bo Ryan had wins elsewhere too. So I'm not talking about Bo Ryan's total win number, but at Wisconsin, Greg Gard could set that record if he continues on this pace. And I find that really interesting, given some of the pushback and some of the in-between with Badger fans. Ultimately, I said this before this season. This isn't a new take. Like, Greg Gard's seat isn't that hot. It wasn't that hot coming into the year. I said that even coming off that JMU loss. There's just not many coaches that win at his clip. And I don't think Chris McIntosh was ever looking to make any type of move there, given some of the issues on the football side and trying to fix that area first. So, yeah, you got to give a lot of credit to Greg Gard this year. This is a quote from Kamari McGee after that 200th win. He said, "I'm speaking on behalf of me, the guys in here, the guys that came before us, 200 wins. Big congratulations. It wasn't pretty tonight. Games aren't always going to be pretty, but we know you got our back, and we always have your back, coach. We appreciate you, and congrats." Kamari McGee speaking very highly on Greg Gard. And then this was Greg Gard's quote after the 200th win, which I thought this was a very Greg Gard type of quote. "You guys know this is not about me," he said. "My name goes with it, but I've had terrific players, the current ones that have been here over the last 9 years, terrific coaches with me. I have a phenomenal staff right now, a support system. It's a lot of hard work by a lot of people, a lot of hours that go unseen and unnoticed to have the opportunity to help a program be successful." There's humility with Greg Gard, and it's always been there. I've always said, very easy guy to root for. Whether or not the success is there ultimately is what matters. Like, being a good guy to root for doesn't ensure you stay at a spot. But if the success is there, it's nice to have a good guy to root for. I've mentioned it before. A lot of coaches, a lot of programs, they probably wouldn't have kept a Carter Gilmore on the roster for a couple years. They probably would have. There's a popular word Wisconsin fans know called creamed. Tom Crean used to cream guys in Indiana, where he would just get rid of them. And that's not the culture at Wisconsin. Greg Gard hasn't fostered that culture. And because of that, you have a guy like Carter Gilmore that's been able to develop into a pretty good player for them. You have a guy like Kamari McGee who came in, and it took a couple years to find the stride, and now you're paying the dividends of that. It's a point I've made where Greg Gard has done a really good job of actually building the culture of this team. And it might give them a bit of a unique advantage in an era where NIL and transfer portal make it really hard to build cultures. The teams that can, the teams that have the ability to do that, they're going to have more of a leg up than anyone else. Now, he's got to be better in March. We've talked about it. I've talked about it. That's a very fair point. But you also can't ignore the regular season success. You can't ignore the fact that he got to 200 wins at a clip that's really just behind a couple Matt Painters and Tom Izzo's types. He's, the fourth coach at this really great Wisconsin university to get 200 wins. It's impressive. And again, hats off. 200 wins is a big deal. And it speaks to it speaks to the fact that he came into a pretty loaded program. That's very fair to say. He took over a team that was good, that had talent, that was used to success. A lot of coaches don't have that opportunity for their first coaching job to be at a spot that is in a pretty healthy spot. But he's maintained that health for the most part. Some coaches take over good programs and tank them. Greg Gard hasn't done that. You got to give him credit for that. I do want to go into this one a little bit before we shift into the next topic, because I was looking up. Okay, so Greg Gard is the fourth coach at Wisconsin to get 200 wins. I was like, who are the other three? And I'm a pretty big Wisconsin fan, but I'm not a historian. And obviously I knew, okay, you got Bo Ryan. And then I was like, who are the other two? And if you guys know this already, if you knew it, hats off to you. I didn't off the top of my head. I didn't. So it's Bud Foster, who I did know that name once I went back and read it. I'm like, oh yeah. So I do know that name. And the other guy was Walter Meanwell, who I didn't know who that was. I'm just going to be honest. I'm not going to blow smoke. I had to go back and look up Walter Meanwell. So we're going to do a little bit of a history lesson here. Badgers basketball, because I didn't know this name. And some of this stuff's just super interesting to me as a fan of the program. Walter Meanwell had 3 national titles at the University of Wisconsin. Coached between Wisconsin and Mizzou. JB on the Discord is going to love that one. He was nicknamed Doc, or Little Doc, because he was 5'6", served in the war, World War I, as a medic, became a captain, came back and coached after that. So had a really interesting career. Ended up doing medicine after retired from coaching basketball at the University of Wisconsin. And in between serving in the war as a medic, becoming a captain, becoming a doctor, he won 3 national titles. So really interesting guy. I couldn't find out a ton about his coaching philosophy. Shockingly, in the early 1900s, there weren't a bunch of bloggers breaking down coaching philosophy. Him being a doctor was probably a more talked about profession. But this is what I could find on Wikipedia about Walter Meanwell's coaching philosophy. He taught a style of game, quote, he taught a style of game that featured short passing, crisscross dribbles, and a tight zone defense. Let's go. Let's go. Short passing, crisscross dribbles, which I think is just a crossover, right? Like, what else would a crisscross dribble be? In a tight zone defense. I wonder if, maybe there could be a disciple of Walter Meanwell to come in and help the Badgers when they want to run a little bit of a zone defense. But aside from that, passing, dribbling, defense, it's all the Wisconsin fundamentals. That's where it started. It wasn't, Bennett or Bo Ryan that instilled the Wisconsin basketball fundamentals. It was Walter Meanwell. Passing, crisscross dribbles, tight defense. I mean, it was his own defense, but it's always fun to go back and look at some of those coaches and players that came long before we started paying attention to this thing, or long before I did. So that's something we're going to do a lot more this summer too. Diving into some Badger history, players, teams, coaches, some iconic moments maybe that have gotten lost a little bit to the pages of time. But yeah, Greg Gard 200 wins, a major hat tip to a guy who's putting together a really good season this year. Only 3 losses. The Badgers are ranked again, and I think this team might set itself up for a bit of a run in March. All right, we're going to take a second here. There's another coach coming on board, another defense coordinator. I want to tell you why I think they've added so much experience and what it could mean for Coach Tressel and his role going forward. That's next on Locked On Badgers. First, let's hear from our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is awesome. I talk about FanDuel a lot. Fast, simple, easy, and they've upped the ante. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's over at FanDuel.com. That's $300 to keep the action going. Always do it responsibly. But FanDuel is the cleanest, simplest, easiest sportsbook. It's why it's the official sportsbook of the NFL, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network, the official sportsbook of your boy Ryan Herrings. We've talked about this a bunch. I would not lead you astray. We are doing this together on the same road. So if I travel that road, I can guarantee you, I recommend that you do, and I'm right there with you. FanDuel makes parlays easy, spreads, teasers. It's all there. All the major sports plus college football playoffs is still going on. NFL, NBA, a ton of action out there to get in on over at the best sportsbook I've ever used over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com, join today, get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's talk some more coaching moves. So the Badgers have done something really interesting this offseason, and it's something a lot of programs are doing. But I'm encouraged by the fact that they are keeping pace. They are keeping up with the Joneses in terms of these coaching hires, because there used to be a limit, right? You had a limit on how many coaches you could have, and you would end up getting into some really tough spots where, do I want an offensive coordinator and a quarterbacks coach, or do I need to combine those? If I want them separate, then I may not be able to have a cornerbacks coach and a safeties coach. I may have to combine those. You don't have to do that anymore. Now you can have multiple coaches at multiple spots. It makes sense. There's no real reason to have an arbitrary number of coaches. There really isn't a reason. Competitive balance for sure, but there's never been competitive balance in college football. So if you want two people to come in and coach linebackers, they can make you better. They can make the players develop better. You're providing more jobs. That's awesome. The Badgers have hired a bunch of assistants, extra assistants this offseason, right? You have a new linebackers assistant in Tuff Borland. You brought in a new receivers coach with an assistant receivers coach. You already have two offensive line guys, right? You have Blazik, but you also have Casey Raybach helping out there. So there's a lot of assistants they've added to this. And the newest one is really interesting to me. Scott Power, former Western Michigan defensive coordinators coming over. If that sounds kind of familiar, they also got Jordan Reed from Western Michigan to coach receivers this offseason. So the Badgers dipped heavily into that program. This is a DC. You have a DC coming in to help coach linebackers. He has experienced some really interesting experience, obviously as a defense coordinator, but he's coached in Louisiana. He's coached in Texas at Stephen F. Austin. He's coached safeties. He's worked with linebackers. He's been a DC. This is another guy, much like Jack Cooper, who's coming over to coach safeties, who has experience across a bunch of domains of coaching with different positions as a coordinator. I think what you're doing is you're adding a lot of positional coaches to fully free up Tressel. Tressel, I think, is going to be fully freed up to be the 30,000-foot guy this offseason. Like, we don't want you worrying about – this is just me reading between the lines, by the way. We don't want you worrying about the individual positional groups. You just focus on, how can I scheme up pressure? How can I defeat opposing offenses? And now we have these other assistants that is going to take the positional coaching off your plate. You focus on the big picture. We're going to handle the individual chess pieces. You lay out the board. And I think that could be a big deal. And if it fails – if something doesn't work right, now you have internal options that have had defensive coordinator experience, that maybe that's the next move, right? I think it gives you internal flexibility. I think it gives you a more coaching acumen inside the building to help out. And I think it's a recognition of, it wasn't good enough last year. We have to get smarter. We have to get better. We have to get new perspectives in here. And the titles almost don't matter as much to me as the background. Well, I want to give you some quotes from people who have talked specifically about Scott Power. This is from Sam Sickless. Sorry, I am mispronouncing that. I think it's Sickless. Arizona, but the Arizona Cardinals linebackers coach. He said Scott is an exceptional hire. He was talking for when he got to Western Michigan, but he said he will bring energy, enthusiasm. He's always evolving, getting his defense to be the cutting edge. Teams will be in great hands with someone looking with him as a coach. This is from Scott Schaefer, former Syracuse head football coach. Hiring Scott Power is a home run. That's a home run hire. I've watched Scott firsthand. I've been impressed with his defense's ability to shut down offenses and force turnovers. Western Michigan got a great one. Again, this is from when he was hired at Western Michigan. Marcus West, Buffalo Bills defensive line coach, said, this is a master of the game. Truly one of the most intelligent coaches I've had the opportunity to be around. I've always admired Scott's passion and dedication to continuously evolve. The second time we've heard somebody say that this is a coach that's willing to evolve. This is from John Glenn, Washington Commanders assistant special teams coach. I've known Scott for 10 plus years. He has all the traits of a great one. Attention to detail, energy, caring for others. You go through and it just feels like kind of a no-brainer addition to add more of that to your staff, to get a little smarter, a little better. You do get to a point where there's too many cooks in the kitchen, but I don't think this is this. I don't think that's this. I think they've added a couple really interesting guys on the offensive and defensive side to help lighten the load of the coordinators so they can focus on what they really need to focus on. Again, a lot of staffs are doing this. A lot of programs are doing this, but the Badgers are keeping pace with it, which I really appreciate. We're going to wrap it up there. Again, really do appreciate everybody tuning in on Wisconsin. Montee Ball to the Hall of Fame. Greg Gard to 200 wins. And the Badgers had a really interesting defensive assistant to their staff and former defensive coordinator Scott Power from Western Michigan. All right, we're going to wrap it there on Wisconsin. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten, all the biggest news and stories from the Big Ten Network over on the Locked On Big Ten channel on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.